everybody. Welcome to another episode of Eyes on Geopolitics. I'm joined today with Mick Mulroy in his suit as always. I think he goes to sleep in that suit. Jason Lyons and myself. Next week we're all wearing blazers. I'm wearing a blazer no matter what, even if Mick's in his regular running outfit. Lot going on as usual. So we're going to lead off with Venezuela and what's going on there over the last week. We've parked a slew of destroyers, 2,200 Marines and a MEU around or near the coast of Venezuela, probably just patrolling the Caribbean. It escalated a bit. We bombed a drug trafficking boat, an alleged drug trafficking boat that I think has been proven that it was, killing 11 people. I saw the video. The video didn't look like there was 11 people there, but I don't know. Maybe somebody was underneath. In response, Venezuela used two F-16s to buzz our destroyers. So things are heating up and ramping up. We've also designated the what's the cartel's name? I have it. Hold on, as I do my note. Thank you.
Oh, the new ones too.
Trendiaragua was the boat. The other one is Damn,
it's not us. Just so everybody knows, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not Lobo Institute.
No, of course, yeah. Los Solis cartel, a terrorist group. And it kind of seems like the war on terror and the war on drugs is kind of like getting together and making a baby. And this is what it looks like. Where are you guys at with this? What are you guys tracking?
Go ahead, man.
Well, first of all, I'm wearing this because I was on ABC. Most people don't roll around Montana in a sport jacket, just so you know. So to start with, they designated the two drug cartels, Trendiaragua and
Los Solis.
Los Solis, yeah, as terrorist organizations back in February. So once that happened, I imagine there was a surge in intelligence capabilities and efforts, both on the overt and covert side. And this was the result. So they've probably been collecting information on who's who in the zoo, who's in charge, how they're getting their drugs to the United States. And of course, drug trade's always been a bad thing to be the United States. But now with fentanyl, it's even worse. And generally put them on notice publicly that this was going to happen. So from my perspective, although one could question the immediate threat of that vessel, but one could also say, well, if they would have let it get to the United States with drugs in it, that would have killed the Americans. So I think that's what they're going to hang their hat on. I'll leave the legal scholars to say which one's accurate. But I think this was something we saw coming. And I also would point out that the military and the CIA would go through their own intelligence review of whether this was a drug trafficking boat, who was in the boat, etc., before it even got up to the point of getting approval from, the commander in chief. So I don't think they just randomly pointed at a boat and said, just make a statement here. So I would say that there is fidelity. I don't know for sure because I don't have access, but there is fidelity on who was on that boat and what they were doing. The response, of course, is concerning. Maduro both said, one, it's AI, so it didn't happen, and then was outraged by it, which in a polite way is very inconsistent, and then buzzed, and I think they've done it twice, the USS Jason Dunham, named after a Marine Medal of Honor recipient, twice with F-16s. And the Venezuelans have anti-ship missiles that are air-launched, sea-launched, and land-launched. So that's very risky because they could have shot at these aircraft and shot them down. That, I think, is within their rules of engagement. And now President Trump has said from the Oval Office, they do it again, that could happen. Now, that would have to be transmitted down the chain of command for it to be a direct order. But I think it's fair to say that when you're flying directly at a ship, when we know you have anti-ship missiles, that the rules of engagement say you could engage. So that's where we are now. There's a lot of stuff on social media. There's about 8 vessels, right? 3 guided missile destroyers, a guided missile cruiser, a nuclear submarine. You've already mentioned the Marine Expeditionary Unit. which has been with training off the coast of Puerto Rico. They've moved 10 F-35s to Puerto Rico. They've apparently moved Reapers to Puerto Rico. So this doesn't seem to be over. Unclear what we intend, or how we intend this to go. But of course, some of that's up to Maduro. And it all also, and I know we're getting into it later, it is in line with what is being leaked as the next national security and national defense strategy, which is a whole other topic. But I think this is going towards something that could escalate pretty quickly.
I mean, there's not much more to add. I think that, like you said, it's in line with what's being leaked for our national security, national defense strategy. But I'm curious as to know where this shift came from, where it happened, especially given the fact that, which, I guess it's nitpicking, but it's like we just renamed the national or Department of Defense, the Department of War, and but now we seem to be turning inward more towards defense. So again, it might be nitpicking, but it's just kind of strange to me. Also, too, and I do first right off the bat wholeheartedly believe that drug dealers get what they deserve. And in the case of that boat, absolutely, you get what you deserve. And I agree that there had to have been, or I'm assuming there was some sort of fixed intelligence that pinpointed this particular vessel as, having fentanyl, something on it that was a threat to the homeland. But I guess the other part of me questions, what is the use of the Coast Guard if this is what we're going to do then? That's what they do. And we've seen the amazing videos of their interdiction crews, hopping on submarines, on cartel submarines. So I believe, this is me personally, that this was just a, hey, we've got the toys, let's use them kind of thing. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. Andy, you got anything?
Andy Milburn's joining us. Hi, Andy. What are your thoughts on this?
All right. So I've got, I wish we had it's the only time I've ever said this. I wish we had a JAG on the show, because I would love to know what the legal ramifications are of that particular strike. I'm with Jay in the sense that, look, we've all been involved in so many strikes overseas, and I'm pausing before saying this because I'm basing it on legal rather than as well as ethical grounds. But so we the point, the rationale. I understand the rationale. We have struck targets that have far more of a nebulous threat in the United States than an inbound boat carrying drugs. But my concerns are simply that, intelligence, we can always get the intelligence wrong, and the ramifications of making the wrong decision so close to our shores, while it may seem as though there is no ethical or legal difference between that and Afghanistan and Iraq, there's a world of difference, because we are operating under an AUMF in Afghanistan and Iraq, and we're not. We're in my mind in uncharted waters when we're doing strikes offshore. Now, from a purely ethical standpoint, yeah, I'm with Jay. I mean, if I could be convinced that everyone on that boat was a bad actor and they were indeed smuggling fentanyl into the United States, no crocodile tears for them. But I just feel as though legally we may be on a slippery slope, and I'd love to hear the opinion of a JAG on that.
So that's a good point, Andy. I mean, I think, I don't know if you were on when I was talking. I didn't have a problem with the strike for reasons both you and Jay said, but when it comes to, at least from the Title 10, the military doing strikes overseas on Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda linked organization, it does come from the authorized use of military force that was passed by Congress. There's no similar authorization to go after drug cartels. So maybe that's why they designate them a terrorist organization. The question is, does that just designate anything, even if you're not connected to Al-Qaeda, connected back to the statutory authorized use of military force to strike terrorists? See what I'm saying? So if you're just designating a criminal organization as a terrorist, then does that count? So, and it goes to a much broader question on the War Powers Act and, the legality and constitutionality of that. I don't know, but nobody's crying about drug smugglers, but that is going to be an issue, and it's something that's never resolved, right? So we have a War Powers Act that no president has agreed actually is constitutional. They abide by some of it, right? And sometimes they decide not to, right? They didn't brief, for example, the alleged operation off of North Korea, but they did brief this because, well, they published the video, right? So
Right.
they obviously had to. But it is a broader question. But I don't think it's going to keep them from driving on with this. I think they're gonna look to continue these type of strikes. They can do stuff under Title 50, right? That they don't have to report. And I don't know, but I'm sure that there's something going on there too. And this could get worse. And by all the reporters that talk to me, some that's already out there there's talks about taking strikes inside Venezuela. So then it would be, an act of war, I suppose. And then we're going to see this escalate. And then, of course, although Venezuela's military can't match the United States, and no country really can, they do have some things that could be problematic to us, which include these anti-ship missiles, right? So we've put in a sizable amount of naval vessels, Marines and sailors out there. They have a threat. And if we did something like land the Marines, their military isn't that big, but they have a militia that's apparently like 4 million people. So we all know how that goes, right? Yeah. I mean, I don't think that's where we're going. I can't imagine we would try to actually invade Venezuela.
Return to the banana wars of the 30s.
The banana wars, and completely contrary to the concept that we're getting out of wars, right? Yeah. We just plunge ourselves into. I don't think that's where it's going. So we should give them some credit. Maybe this is just an amping up a military interaction with trying to stem the drug flow in the United States.
Hey guys, it's Jack. I just want to talk to you for a moment about how you can support the show if you've been watching it, enjoying it, but you'd like to get a little bit more involved and help us continue to do this. You can check out our Patreon. It is patreon.com/theteamhouse. And for $5 a month, you can get access to all of these episodes of The Team House ad-free. The same goes with our affiliated podcast, Eyes On, with Andy Milburn, Jason Lyons, Mick Mulroy. That one, you will also get all of those episodes ad-free. And you support the channel and the show, and we really appreciate it. The Patreon members are literally what has helped this company, this small business survive, especially during our early years. And you are what continues to help this thing going, even as we navigate the turbulent world of YouTube advertising. So we really appreciate all of you guys. There's going to be a link down in the description to that Patreon page, and there is also going to be a link to our new merch shop. So if you guys want to go and get some Team House merchandise, we got stickers, and we also have patches. And I should mention, if you sign up for Patreon at $10 a month, we will mail you this patch as well. So we really appreciate that. But they're also for sale on the merch shop. And additionally, they got t-shirts up there, water bottles, a tote bag, coffee mugs, all that good stuff. So please go and check them out and support the show. We really appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
I think there was certainly an element of showmanship. It was kind of a demonstration, hey, this is what we can do against drug traffickers. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this develops. We had that conversation back in January on going after the cartels, and our consensus was, I think, looking back, that there was certainly some sympathy for a policy like that, because we've all been involved in operations overseas where the direct connection with U.S. national interest was pretty nebulous, let's be honest. And we're all victims, in a sense, or unhappy observers of what happened in Afghanistan. So using the military with the direct correlation to preventing bad things coming to the United States ostensibly does not seem like a bad thing. I'm not wringing my hands about it. But again, the legal ramifications are tough. Hey, I've got a question for you though, Mick, on, we're talking about what needs to be declared to Congress. So something like what happened in North Korea. So I understand under Title 50, there are things, of course, that that don't have to be declared. But then the Church Commission, the outcome of the Church Commission was that intelligence operations have to be briefed to Congress, right? Where is the cutoff point?
At least a gang of 8, right?
Yeah. So the issue really comes to complete deniability, right? So if a military operation happens under Title 10 and the report in the New York Times guy asked the spokesman at the Pentagon, did that happen? They can say no comment. If the president's asked about a CIA operation, he or she or anybody else in his government can say it did not happen, never happened. They can deny it. Both have to be briefed to Congress. So the intelligence community have our own, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. If this was a Title 50 operation, for example, and it could have been, I think, and I'm not validating this happened. I have no idea. Right? This is what the New York Times reported. They still would have to brief it to their oversight committee. They might be able to make the argument that it's only the chairman and deputy chairman, right? Because of the sensitivity of it. But that counts for both as briefing. And like Dee said, maybe the gang of 8. But there isn't a requirement of who necessarily. It just has to be briefed. So that's problematic if they didn't brief, especially a Title 10 operation. I don't know that, right now that's going to be made an issue because of the unwillingness to buck anything the president does now or did then. And it's not approval, by the way. It's just informing. They can say this was a terrible idea or is a great idea. And they do that often with, CIA operations. But it's just an actual informing, so they know what happened and they can be part of the dialogue potentially in the future on similar operations. But they don't have the ability necessarily to block operations, just the funding.
They're informed beforehand?
They don't necessarily have to be informed beforehand. It can come after. Right? Because they don't have a veto. So being informed. Now, oftentimes we do when it's going to be a big overt strike, right? Like when we did the strikes in Syria when they used chemical weapons, the Assad regime did. We briefed, that was part of my job, not only the key members of the Senate and House, but also key allies, just so they know what's going to happen. Because once it happens, you can brief them afterwards, but they could just turn on NBC News.
Yeah, and this one we didn't hear anything about the SEALs in North Korea.
Right.
Go
Yes.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah.
Well, it just seems like rather a powerless obligation. So you brief, the Church Commission requires that brief, but if the people briefed have no power of veto and they can't talk about it, then it's almost worthless.
So the only thing that I've seen that they have the ability to do is if it's an ongoing thing, they can cut funding for it. Like say we're going to and by the way, the CIA doesn't come up with this stuff by itself. Like this rogue element stuff hasn't been the case since, as Andy mentioned, the Church Commission. Like the president says, do this to the CIA, and the CIA, does its best to carry out the mission, just like the military. But it's not a CIA coming up with like, we're going to overthrow a regime or something. It's done by the president. If I'm just using that as a hypothetical, the CIA is tasked to overthrow country X, it would be briefed to the HIPSI and the SISI. They could disagree with it, right? And then they could essentially cut off funding for it. So if it's a long campaign, they have the ability.
Then there is a right to
affect it. Yeah.
Was there anything in like the thought process of not informing at least the chairmans of the committees that were supposed to be informed? Because it was 2019, right, when this went down. At least the SEAL mission in North Korea. It must have been Title 50, right? If it's Title 10.
Not necessarily. They could do it under Title 10. So I don't know that it's true. I have no idea. I didn't have anything to do with North Korea, by the way. So I just want to put that out there.
So my point that I was trying to make was like the reason why they didn't inform anybody in Congress, even one or two people, was because some of at 2019 at that point, Democrats controlled the House and the chairmans were Democrats. Were they worried about a leak or something like that? Like, was it more political in nature for not telling them? Because, yeah, even if it doesn't have any effect where they can't veto it, we're still a democracy, right? We should inform the people's representatives about what we're doing, and like whether it's covert operations or overt operations. At least I think.
So I don't know that it wasn't briefed. We're just going on what the report says.
Sure.
But if that's accurate, I don't see the excuse for not briefing it. It was either, if you're concerned about leaks, that's when you only brief it to certain people. And obviously if it comes out, but it did come out, right? They didn't even brief it.
It seems to me
a lot of people jumped on the idea that it was, and yes, I'm biased. My business partner is from that unit, and I have a ton of friends from that unit. They're like, oh, it must have been somebody who was on the operation. No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. I mean, those guys have a very good reason not to leak any of those type of things because, think about it if they're tasked to do it again. Right? You don't think that, the Hermit Kingdom, the totalitarian state of North Korea is going to do something based on this report? So I would push back against people to just assume it was somebody on that operation. It could have been somebody for political reasons that found out later. But I can't think of a reason why it wouldn't have been.
Reading the article, it seemed like they got their hands on like an AAR. And I could be wrong because I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But it really does seem like somebody got their hands on that. And like,
well, there was an investigation conducted by a three-star general, so it could well have been that.
And then somebody
the circle kept getting bigger and bigger.
Yep.
I mean, listen, it would have been pretty cool as shit if they got it done.
Yeah, I think it's also going to have a relooking at how we do sensor emplacement, right? I mean, we've got unmanned everything now. Just throwing it out there.
I was going to say. It just seems a crazy way to do that. I just can't think of the rationale. I mean, Mick and Jason, you know more about this than I do, but from a technical standpoint, I just can't imagine a situation where you have to put people in that way in order to place it. And I'm wondering how much of this was an argument from, from JSOC or the SEAL community from within SEAL Team 6 that they were the guys to do this.
Well, certainly if this was needed humans to do it, they are the guys to do it. I don't know the debates. Or the specifics of why they had to use this level of force. But that's also, in the broader picture, it should have been briefed. I can't think of a reason why it wouldn't have been.
Me speculating again a little bit, reading the article, it seemed like the SDV team and the SEAL Team 6 team were kind of like pointing at each other like it was your fault. No, it was your fault. At least how the article reads, right? That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that's the case, obviously. It could just be what they've read on like the investigation that was done and stuff, but that's what it felt like. It read like anyway. And I don't know anything about anything, so I only know what Mick tells me offline.
Well, again, on the macro level, apparently we're not interested in North Korea anymore. If the leaks on the national security strategy and national defense strategy are accurate, that we're shifting from looking at China and Russia, and of course, as the first tier concern for the national security of the United States, Iran and North Korea as the second tier. And now we're focused on domestic, which is kind of crazy considering the U.S. military is not supposed to have much of a role in domestic, operations, nor is the agency for that matter, and in Latin America, right? So if that would be an entire sea change from every administration past, including the first Trump administration, if it's accurate, that we're and against a lot of people that would be, I think, writing this right now would have had to completely change their position. Since when I was involved, in my role before, the national security strategy, the defense strategy, and the regular warfare annex, which all focused on what we called at the time near peer competitors. now strategic competitors or whatever we call them. Maybe we don't call them that anymore since we don't seem to put them highest on the list. Now we got to wait till it actually comes out. There will be a public version. So if this is just inaccurate, then I withdraw my previous.
Be interesting to see if Canada is up there.
I mean, in my opinion, they're enemy number one. Let's be honest.
I can't say that. They're just there. They're right there.
Yeah.
Right there.
How dare they with their maple syrup and their free healthcare? Like, how dare they?
Ratcheting down China from our national security strategy, national military strategy.
Andy, can you get a little bit closer to the camera?
Yeah. I was just saying, taking China down a notch on those strategies has potential implications for Taiwan.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Good point.
Having China up there, we've always played this ambiguity, right, on whether or not we would go to the defense of Taiwan, because honestly, I don't think any administration can really answer that question, although I think it ostensibly seems unlikely that we would, because of the nature of such a conflict, would almost be a fait accompli, and it would be us trying to dislodge China after an amphibious landing. Hard thing to justify to the American public. But as a deterrent, we always had China up there as a threat, and we always sensibly we trained and talked about the defense of Taiwan. But if it's no longer in our national military strategy, what message are we sending to China? I mean, is that going to be a green light to cross the straits?
Yeah, and it's not just Taiwan either, but I mean, look at Japan. They're in chaos right now. Their prime minister just resigned. He's only been, I think it's less than a year he's been in, and they're going through all that turmoil and trying to figure out who's next. And then now this happens, if it's true, we kind of do an about face with the Pacific, everybody, Philippines, everybody, they're all going to be wondering, what's next? Who do we turn to for this? So it's going to be interesting.
Absolutely. And this comes at the same time we just saw this Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in China, right? Which should have scared the bejesus out of all the policymakers and warfighters, quite frankly, in Washington, D.C. They should be saying, oh, okay, so now they are openly conspiring to dethrone the United States world order, the one we created, which is advantageous to ourselves. No surprise there. And they're doing so not just with the normal bad actors, the China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, but they have what could be, and should be, one of the most important strategic partners of the U.S. in the 21st century, India. Right? And here they're laughing it up, chumming it up. They're agreeing to do things like this SCO development bank, which is going to do what? It's going to replace the vacuum that we left, right? Certainly with USAID, IMF, the World Bank, and they're not doing it for benevolent reasons. They're trying to basically get their sphere of influence broader and our sphere of influence lesser, right? So they're doing that. They're doing things together on AI, security, the development of new technologies. You name it, they're doing it. And they're doing it with about 20 countries. It started as a very regional thing and now has gotten significant. And the president recognized it. It's literally said that they're conspiring against the United States in a social media post. So we have apparently a national security strategy that totally pivots internally to the domestic and to the south of us at the same time that our adversaries are building their sphere of influence all around the world to include Europe, the Middle East, Europe, at least close to Europe. Turkey was there, it's important to point out, a NATO ally was at this conference. And of course, all throughout the Middle East, Africa, and the Indo-Pacific. Big problem. Put it together, and we've got a significant shift in worldwide influence.
Mick, riddle me this. I mean, so the president tweets about, China trying to curry influence with the SCO, right? presidential it's a statement, right, from the president, the chief guy in terms of our foreign policy, and the national defense strategy is going to start pivoting to regional and domestic. How does what the president say and what they're doing with the national defense strategy even jive, even seem like a coherent strategy in any way, shape, or form?
Well, if it comes out, and again, there's a public national security and national defense strategy usually. There's also, classified versions. I think China and the rest of the SCO is going to say, perfect. This is exactly what we wanted them to do. Have them, and of course, this isn't just military, right? We're talking about defense strategy, but the national security strategy is diplomatic, economic. It's everything. It's everything around the world and how it affects us. It's how we trade with other countries. So it's how they decide who they're going to have the most favored trading partners with, who they're going to partner with if there's a conflict. And we need to have partner countries to actually hope it doesn't happen, but go to war again. Right. This plays into everything. It's the dime, right? It's everything. And they're looking at it for a way to seize control, turn it to what they call a multipolar world. And of course, what they mean is one they dominate together, especially the big two, and have control over us. And so I think there's going to be a lot of talk. There already is a lot of talk from both sides of the aisle on the SEO summit. And if this comes out the way it's being reported, that's just going to add to the, I think, loudness of the conversation in Washington, D.C. on just where we're going with our foreign policy.
I'm trying to figure out if our foreign policy now is focused. I mean, this sounds like an anomaly. If it's now focused more domestically, what does that look like as far as employment of the military?
I don't know, National Guard in the streets of major cities?
I mean, are we talking domestic? Mick mentioned, the border, and beyond the border. But I'm just trying to think what there is. I get it, aside from the problem of illegal immigration, aside from the problem with drugs, but it just doesn't seem to me as though those problems require, how big is our military? 3 million? 3.5 million, not counting reserves? No, I mean, counting reserves, sorry.
I think it's like 1.3 active. 1.3 active.
Counting reserves. Right. And this, of course, the national security strategy, certain defense strategies is written for the National Guard. The National Guard's part of it. Right. Yeah. But think about the rest of the active forces, which generally don't have a role inside the United States, posse comitatus and all sorts of restrictions. So again, it hasn't been published yet, so maybe we should wait before we criticize something that might not be accurate as reported. But certainly if that is the case, it's going to cause big issues. We're going to focus all of our military efforts on Venezuela.
Right.
Yeah. I often wonder, I retired 6 years ago now. And, when I retired, OIR was still going on. But I wonder now what it is like in the military, because, for most of us, all our memories in the military were of war, right? I mean, there was a fallow period in the 90s when we weren't at war, but even then there were pop-up things. But now it's been, essentially conventional troops withdrew from Afghanistan in 2014, right? So it's been a long period where people have gone in and out, and now people late in their careers have never experienced combat. And I'm wondering how that has affected morale. I know it hasn't affected recruiting that much, right? I mean, recruiting certainly the Marine Corps meeting recruiting goals. I don't know how, but it's in, and now they're just, at least, look, I'm not getting nostalgic about this, but, at least during the wars, right? The war on terror, whatever we're calling it now, Iraq and Afghanistan, there was a proximate purpose to what we were doing. We were training up, we were deploying, and I get it. I just can't imagine being in the military now year after year where you are just training to do nothing. That makes me sound like a warmonger, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why we have a military, is to be ready, right? We don't want to be in a constant state of war. But I hear you. Most of our careers were in a state of war, right? The global war on terror. I would point out, as people are talking about the military and get back to this war ethos. I don't think the military ever left the warrior ethos. So just because political people weren't in charge at the time, I'd like to do a little sticking up for the military.
Yeah.
We took down the Taliban and toppled them in Afghanistan in about 6 weeks. We took down a very sizable military and modern in Iraq in 26 days, right? The U.S. military, with the help of the agency, but the U.S. military predominantly. And, whether we should have done Iraq, how we left Afghanistan or should have left Afghanistan, that wasn't up to the military, man. That was political decisions, policy decisions. So the idea that we've lost our warrior ethos and our ability to fight wars is just, I think, factually incorrect, and it's disrespectful for the people who fought those wars. And anyway, want to point that out, because this idea that until a certain political entity gets in charge, whether it's right or left or whatever, that's all of a sudden the military becomes competent or not. It's just, it defies logic, and it's disrespectful for the people who serve apolitically, which should be the entire military under any administration, and they're always preparing for defense of their country.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Marine Corps was a far better organization when I got out than when I came in. No, that had nothing to do with me, my period of service. But it was. Marines were better trained. I mean, a lot of factors came into play there. There's natural progression, the fact that wars do force improvement and adaptation. And I think the Marine Corps adapted very well and very quickly to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan at the tactical level, very well. And I'm generally very proud of having been a Marine and seeing performance there. And that isn't me just chest beating, because I can also be very critical. But I think the way that we, in a short period of time, trained and deployed individuals and units to go to Iraq, and the way that they behaved, responded to a very difficult situation, a counterinsurgency, says a lot for the U.S. military. And yeah, I agree with you, Mick. I don't buy the fact that we lost lethality along the way at all. I really don't. I think I didn't see it during my time there. I just saw, in fact, Marines were tougher. They were fitter. They were tougher. NCOs were better, across the board. And I'm sure it's continued to, the Marine Corps continued to progress in that regard in the last few years. I just hope that we're not now facing a period where the military is going to be misused.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest.
1 second, Jay. This segment is brought to you by the United States Marine Corps. Go to usmc.com. Go ahead, Jay. Sorry.
No, it's all good. Now I was going to say, I think probably, and this is just me mind reading, the biggest question in the mind of these young kids, and it's crazy that I can call them kids, in the military today is probably, like you just said, what you just finished with, Andy, is what are we going to be used for next? It's like they're trained up, and I do believe, I agree with both of you that they've stayed lethal throughout, despite everything else external that's going on, politics or whatever.
I hate that term, by the way.
I do too, but you know what? I had to use it.
It's like the term
I believe
warrior.
that their warrior ethos has always been there in the men and women of the armed forces. I don't doubt that at all. Ethos. Yes, but I think
sounds like a coffee company.
Yeah, it does. There's an idea. Write that down. I think it's more a question of where are we going to be used, especially now if, and going back to what Mick said, we don't know. But if it is published and becomes public that, yes, we are turning inward towards, and our focus is domestic, it's like, am I going to Los Angeles? Am I going to get that Los Angeles deployment ribbon? Am I going to Birmingham, Alabama? What's going to happen with me? This is not what I signed up for. And I'm not saying that that's what they're saying, because some of them probably wouldn't care. It's like, you tell me where to go and I'm going to go. But from the outside looking in, I think that that's probably our biggest concern is going to be where we're training these kids to fight and B, to use that warrior ethos. But if you're talking, and when you start using that word domestic, now two things are starting to butt up against one another. Lethality, sorry, I had to use it again, and domestic. And we know how that turns out, Kent State, things like that. So I think that's probably what's on their mind. I should say the leadership. Whereas the young Lance Corporal and the Corporal, probably, Lance Corporals, PFCs, stuff like that, they're probably like, just send us wherever you need us to go. They're ready to do their jobs.
Well, if the national military strategy does downplay China, that's a huge, that's a big deal for the Marine Corps because the last few years, the Marine Corps
design is all about that, right?
All about China, and so there's a lot of planners in the Marine Corps who are going to be scratching their heads and figuring out, okay, what do we do now?
Yeah.
I belong to a group called the Vandenberg Coalition, right? And Vandenberg was a senator who said that, politics should stop at the water's edge. I think that's the motto of the group. And it's got people that were in it, like Senator McCain, obviously passed away, and who's the, sorry, his name escaped me now, but he was almost his running mate. He's a Democrat. It's really close to
Lieberman.
McCain. Lieberman, there you go. So it has both sides. It's a bipartisan group. And the point being that there's a reason why we want our foreign policy to be nonpartisan, because if you have a strategy that doesn't last beyond 4 years, it's not a strategy, right?
Yeah.
It's wild shifting back and forth, and it's inconsistent and essentially ineffective to even have a strategy. So having a combined one where you invite both sides to actually discuss what's best for the U.S. in foreign policy to push back against China and Russia, and obviously the priorities themselves, is what's best for the U.S.
And that was
Seems like we got
that was certainly the way things were. Obviously, during the Cold War, the strategy was a single strategy. It was containment, and that continued, regardless of which party was in power, and it continued. It really did continue through I hate to use the term war on terror because it doesn't make sense, but it continued during that period, right? There was, but it was more a kind of, it was more kind of a disinterest. It was a hands-off view of the war on terror. No one really questioned what the policy goals there or whether we were achieving them. So it kind of had a negative aspect. But yes, now it seems as though we're in the potential era of whiplash, and that's why China is a great example, and the Marine Corps all in pursuit of Force Design 2030, which, by the way, for those of our listeners, watchers who are not familiar with it, it basically about 10 years ago, right, started looking at China as what was called a pacing threat, and how how the Marine Corps was going to counter China in the Pacific. And I'm making this very, very simple, but it came down to that Marines were there to enable surveillance, right, and to enable long-range precision strike using anti-ship missiles, to set up kill zones using the island chains, and in doing so, pursuing a very distributed mode of warfare. All right, both in the terms of how the Marine Corps was arrayed and how it was going to supply itself, and that's why we got rid of our tanks, and I believe we got rid of a number of our artillery units, and we went all in on what we call the Marine Littoral Regiments, whose purpose would be to enable long-range surveillance and also long-range precision strike. I think, if the guys correct me if I'm off target there, and it created a great deal of controversy in the Marine Corps, especially among the retirees, senior officers, and it was one of the only times that I have seen former Marines, senior Marines go after each other publicly in the media and on social media. The commandant at the time, General Berger, was the subject of a good deal of a good deal of criticism, to include from former commandants in public, and the current commandant too, for their support of Force Design 2030. So, and now, I mean, everything shifted towards that particular strategy for the Marine Corps, to include the acquisition programs, training, organization, everything across .MPLF. And so if China is no longer the pacing threat, it's going to be very interesting. I mean, are we going to get our tanks back? What's going to happen? And there's going to be a good deal of chest beating in the media from those who've been getting very emotional and critical of Force Design 2030.
And just so some of the audience might know, but the national defense strategy is like the overall policy for the DoD, and then out of it, the national military strategy is how the military meets that strategy, right? And the policy that's put out. So if this comes out, again, we keep saying if because we're just reading reports, but it's all over the place now, that we're focusing on domestic and, this hemisphere, then the national military strategy is going to react to it. They're going to shift resources, to Andy's point, if you're following the strategy, right? Domestic in this Western Hemisphere. So they're going to shift forces out of the Indo-Pacific, and I assume the Middle East and Europe, to match the priorities as stated by the president, the White House. So it's going to do a big number on force design and the entire plan for a whole branch of service. That's going to be a pretty big shift.
Taking it down to the micro view, what does that do to that Lance Corporal, Sergeant who have been training to fight the Chinese or fight in the Pacific? Now mentally they have to shift focus and use that same, I would assume, those same strategies, tools, TTPs to now focus on a domestic and a regional stage. That's got to have some kind of psychological effect on them. I'm not saying it's going to drive them crazy, but it's got to be confusing to them, to have that 0-6 formation and say, hey, we're changing tactics. You can throw those Mandarin or whatever books away on phrases. Now we're going to give you some Spanish phrases to learn, stuff like that. It's got to be pretty frustrating for them. Again, if it happens.
I think, fortunately, the reluctance of the Marine Rifle Squad platoon to adapt in that sense is going to be a huge advantage. Mm. And my direct experience is a little bit dated. It's a few years old, but until I left for Ukraine in 2022, I was covering the Marines warfighting exercises in 29 Palms, where they were supposed to be training for peer-on-peer engagement, i.e. going against the Chinese. And I will say that the way that the Marine Corps Rifle Squad operated had changed not at all. And for better and for worse. I mean, the tactics that they were training to close with and destroy the enemy by fire and maneuver it remained exactly the same. Their organic weapons remained the same. The way they used them remained the same as they did when I was a Lance Corporal. So, and they were slow to adapt. I mean, they were slow for a number of reasons. It just seemed culturally difficult to get them to use drones in the way, for instance, that at Marine in MARSOC that we use drones. And partly because the drones that they were issued were kind of pieces of shit, but also it was just so embedded in the culture for Marines to do what they've always done. So I don't think there'll be so much of a change there, but there will at the planner level, and again, we've already got the Marine Corps Littoral Regiment, and we no longer have artillery. We do have artillery. I'm sorry, but I believe we scaled down on our artillery And we got rid of our tanks, which was a very emotional issue for a lot of Marines, not just tankers. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes. What else did we got something rid of? We got rid of something else that I hadn't realized the other day. Do you guys, capability wise, is that ringing a bell with you guys for 2030?
The Marines?
Yeah.
Did we get rid of stay platoons? Are they gone?
We got rid of snipers. Yeah.
Snipers.
We got rid of
Okay.
snipers. Talking about
That's
an
right.
emotional reaction to that,
Yeah.
which makes no sense to me.
Why would they do that?
And then they probably rename somebody that gets additional training in how to be a long-range marksman, and then they'll
Yeah.
That's
What
a
is the
sniper.
Army's like designated
Right.
marksman or something like that?
Yeah. It's like, so you just got rid of one of the most, storied MOSs in the U.S. Marine Corps, and then you're going to recreate them. You are. I mean, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like,
And
what's up
there
with
were
that?
intangible benefits to having snipers. I mean, there was the ethos, but the thing is that that shooting was about 10% of what they did. I
Right.
mean, so the
Stalking.
guys that did well and became snipers and got through sniper school, yes, they had the skills of shooting and stalking and all that other stuff that may seem archaic, but they had observation skills. They were savvy. They were good technically, and all of those things mean that they could have adapted very well to operating drones and using drones, to the both for strike and surveillance to the greatest effect. I think that to me getting rid of them made no sense. I mean, it didn't save the Marine Corps a ton of money, I'm sure, either.
Army didn't get rid of them. SOCOM didn't get rid of them. JSOC didn't get rid of them.
Yeah. But I think no one's really aware that the Army ever had snipers in the first place, so it was easy just to...
But the skill set, what they want,
a sniper in the
is
Army is
value
someone
in it.
who's just passed their qualification course.
Comments are just going to light up.
This is brought to you by the United States Marine Corps.
That was his long way of saying that the Navy should have gotten rid of carriers. That was his roundabout way.
If we're shifting to domestic and regional, see you later, carriers.
No, carriers, no.
Then is this going to last 3 years, and then the next administration, be it Republican or Democrat, goes back to what I would say is the traditional view of
sadly,
American foreign policy?
carriers are, the justification was not in conflict against China. In fact, the greatest criticism of the carrier groups was that they were so vulnerable in a war against China. But they're great for force protection. I mean, you want to put a carrier off, I don't know, Venezuela or Latin America. I mean, it's the modern version of gunboat diplomacy, right? That's why you always read in the papers, the United States has now sent 3 carriers to the Middle East. I mean, it's really kind of a statement, isn't it? I mean, and in the war on terror, they were a great platform for close air support because they were relatively invulnerable. So I'm afraid that a shift away from China will see a resurgence of those who love carriers at $12 million a pop.
Billion, yeah.
But we did get rid of snipers, right?
Yeah.
Well, we saw China's
$500,000.
We saw China's parade, right? So there's a lot of new weapon systems rolled out there. Laser weapon systems from space, from ship, I believe. A lot of hypersonic missiles, new drones, land, sea, air. Probably all of it stolen from U.S. defense contractors to make.
Yeah.
But that's a concern, right? I mean, they're gearing up to fight us, and we're gearing down to fight them. So think about it. If we're not there, we're not studying the enemy. We're not preparing for a conflict with them. And as we've seen in history, it's not always up to us whether we enter a war or not, a la Pearl Harbor. So our most considerable adversaries, one is building up their forces substantially and building up their alliances. The other is actively at war with a European country. It's showing zero interest in stopping and we're having zero effect on their calculation to enter negotiations. So shifting away from those could seriously be at the U.S. peril. And I think you're going to hear a lot about it if this is the way we're going with our national security strategy.
Yeah, putting all these tariffs on China is going to do no good if China takes Taiwan, right? I mean, we're going to see a a an ex I don't want to say a tsunami effect against our economy if that happens, but it is, there's as far as companies like Taiwan Semiconductor, I mean, they provide the chips, or they provide technology that fuels NVIDIA and so many other U.S. companies, that there's bound to be a tremendous effect on the U.S. economy if China takes Taiwan. And aside from just, if for those who care anymore, our credibility in the world. But it's difficult to imagine now, if we are indeed pivoting away from the Pacific, to us providing a deterrent. Certainly no means of forcing our way back in without taking high casualties. That would be unacceptable to the U.S. public if China and Xi has said that is his goal. I mean, he's been out quite up front with it, right? When it's going to happen, who knows? But it's certainly a possibility.
Headed in that direction, right? So 40% of the world's population was represented by the 20 countries that went to the summit in China. 40% of the world's population, only 20 countries. Right? So the more they get them under their influence, the more we show an indifference to Ukraine's in supporting them, and the strategic shift away from putting China as a priority is only going to Andy's point, bolden China to do something in Taiwan. As long as they feel they can do it, and that we're not going to do anything, or nobody else is, because nobody's going to do anything if we don't.
Yeah.
Right? So it's either us or to build an alliance that would do it. Then we know where this is headed. I think that's a good guess.
God, I want a feel-good story. Good God. Give us some Irish propaganda or something, Mick, for God's sakes.
Feel-good Irish propaganda?
Yeah, that might be a tall order. All right, so just to button up the Venezuela thing, a couple of facts just for folks to understand. 2/3 of the drugs that come into the United States are from the Pacific coast. Venezuela doesn't produce cocaine or heroin. They are a transit point, much like Mexico is. For the most part, Mexico also does produce their own stuff. But most of the cocaine that comes into the country is from Colombia, Peru. So it's not exactly in the terms of really affecting the war on drugs. I don't think going after these cartels in Venezuela really is going to put a dent in many things. So I think that needs to just be understood by everybody too, because it's kind of missing the forest for the trees here.
There'll be empirical statistics to show if this works.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the wishful thinking, the hope is that stepping up to Venezuela like this is going to embolden their military to overthrow Maduro, which Maduro is obviously a piece of shit. He's not a good guy. He stole his election essentially.
Absolutely did.
Yeah. So he's a straight up autocrat who's definitely making money from the narco trade. But I feel like it's wishful thinking, hoping that somehow, some way the military is going to step up. And their Venezuelan opposition party's all giddy about this, and I get it why. But let's be a little pragmatic here. Also, we made a deal with Venezuela recently about Chevron selling us oil. And now we're bombing stuff and bombing their narco traffickers and calling them a terrorist state. So go ahead. I'm sorry, Andy.
I was just going to say, we don't have a good track record when it comes to overthrowing autocrats. I mean, we can do it, but we can't control what happens next.
I said we got to let loose the CIA. I'm not even saying that because Mick's here. Do some covert stuff. Try to get a coup going back with. That's perennially what we're good at. Or
going back to what Andy just said, doesn't always work.
Yeah, well, sure, that's fair.
Doesn't always work out.
But we have some experience in that.
Iran, Chile.
Sometimes the coup works out. It's just the results aren't the
yeah.
turns out to be, that's part of the consequences, but it should be part of the foreign policy strategy. Incorporate the concern in the past from the agency is when they go, oh, we can't figure out how to do whatever it is they want to do. Diplomacy's failed. We're not going to use the military. Toss it over to the agency. Well, that's not what you want. You want to start with, the dumpster fire and say good luck to you. It needs to be like incorporated at the beginning as a topic for another.
Also, with Venezuela, I mean, clearly China and Russia want to assert influence there, right? Because Venezuela's selling their oil to China.
Yeah.
So, how do they react?
China's coming to their, at least rhetorical defense.
All right. Anything else, boys?
Well, at the very least, I think we need to know more about what's going on in Venezuela. Maybe send in SEAL Team 6 to plant some sensors.
Had to get that last one in.
Yeah. So what you're saying, Andy, is that like Marines should flood buds and take over? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
I wouldn't.
Or if you want to become a SEAL, you need to go to Marine boot camp instead of Navy boot camp.
This is not a.
Every unit has its place, man. You
Yeah.
never know what's going to be the most important, right?
Yeah. All right.
All right. So, guys, this show is brought to you by the USMC, Semper Fi. Check them out at usmc.gov or wherever their website is. I'm sending them a fucking invoice. You think I'm kidding?
As they say, the Army and the Navy are traditional military organizations. The Air Force is a corporation, but the Marine Corps is a religion. So it's,
yes, sir.
We can't help it. We can't help it.
Yeah.
I think that was meant as a criticism, actually.
Yeah.
But
Of course,
true Marine
Marines took that as a compliment.
Yes.
Of course.
All right, boys. This was great, as usual. Awesome talk. Don't forget to hit up all the guys' links are in the description. Check them out there. Andy's book, of course, Mick's organizations, Jason's socials. Everything's down in the description. And, of course, patreon.com/theteamhouse. You get both the Team House and Eyes On ad-free and early. And you help support the show. So we really appreciate that. Thanks again, guys.
Bye,
Thanks,
fellas.
gents.
It's-
Take care, everybody.
Hey guys, I want to tell all of you today about a new newsletter that we're launching that encompasses both the Team House podcast, the Eyes On podcast, and the High Side news outlet, which I run with Sean Naylor. The newsletter is going to be once a week. It's going to come into your inbox, and you're going to get the most current podcasts on Eyes On and the Team House and whatever's topical or current on the high side. So it's another way for us to get the information out to you, as social media algorithms are pretty iffy and you never really know what you're going to get. So this is a once a week email. It'll slide into your inbox and it will have, the greatest hits of that week.
It's really good, man. I'm checking it out.
The website for it is teamhousepodcast.kit.com/join. teamhousepodcast.kit.com/join. You go there and you enter into your email list, or you enter your email into the little thing on the website, and you're good to go. And that'll be it. So we really appreciate your support and hope you'll consider signing up.
Where's the link?
The link will also be down in the description if you're looking for it there.
And that's teamhousepodcast.kit, KIT, Kilo India Tango.com /join.